Good afternoon, class. I will use this medium to welcome everybody back to year 2022. By doing so, I also wish you good luck on academic excellence in this particular year. Let me also welcome you back to post 412 class, and particularly on our discussion on study section 3, simply titled Civilian Participation in Nigerian Forced Military Regime. Civilian participations in Nigerian Forced Military Regime. What are those things we shall be looking at under this particular study section? Basically, they are categorized into four. So we shall be looking at the extent of civilian involvement in the forced military government. We want to examine to what extent are the civilian involved in Nigerian forced military government, because as at that time, military are totally new to the doctrine of governance. So they have to rely on support from civilian if they are to be successful in their new adventure. Before then, they were being referred to as barrack boys. Their activities were limited to the barracks and to the field of war. But now they have seized the opportunity to seize government and to rule in the terrain which they are not familiar with. So no doubt they have to clandestinely or stylishly involve some politicians, particularly those that are willing to serve under the military regime, to help them in their new adventure. We are also going to look at the influence of civilians over the military government during this period. Don't forget that I said before military seized power in 1966, when they during military coup that seized power from Tafawa Balewa and Nnamdi Azikiwe. They were new in this terrain. Military were new. They were very new. They are novice when it comes to governance, because all they know is to fight war, to defend the country against external aggression. Now they find themselves in another terrain entirely, giving excuses of mass crisis, violence, and corruptions against the civilian government as at then, for them to seize power and normalize things as they claim. So in their new adventures, in which they have to involve the XY civilians to help them in finding a way through which they can rule successfully. We now want to also look at the influence those civilians that were involved in the government or the forced military regime, how much of influence did they exert in that military regime. We also want to look at why did military invited the civilian to their government, and the reason are not far-fetched. Military are known to be soldier boys or soldier men. Their roles are known to be involved in the governance. They are not to make policy. They are not to make laws. They are not to adjudicate cases. Their own role is simply defined by the constitutions to defend the country against external aggressions, to protect the territorial jurisdiction of the country, and also to ensure peace and tranquility within the country. So that's their role. So the mere fact that they are not trained to govern, they are not trained to make rules, they are not trained to implement policy, they are not trained to formulate policy and so on and so forth. So that one alone compel them to invite the people that are meant to do the job, even though serving as advisory body in this context, because the military has the final authority. Even when they invited the civilian as a then, the military also enjoy that the final authority reside with them. They are only using the civilian leader as advisory bodies, you know, discussing with them on a regular basis and seeking advice on where on some issue they cannot handle. Finally, we also want to look at how the civilian politician rated the military government. How did the civilian politician rate the military ruler or military government? Of course, someone that kick you out of power and take your positions, I don't think it's only logical that their rating of military government will be badly. It will be badly rated. That's why the civilian politician will always refer to military government as undemocratic, not civil, unfriendly, corrupt, gangsterism, nepotism, and so on and so forth. That's how they describe the military regime. So now I want to look at the real issue here when we are talking about the extent at which civilian involved in the first military government. Due to tensions and crises that follow the first military coup, when Aguiyi-Ironsi took over the power in 1966, there were uproar, there were crises, there were protests, both from the north, from the south, particularly from the southwest. There are crises, there are uproar, there are agitation, there are protests, there was civil unrest, especially in the north, because that military coup of 1966 was tagged as ethnic genocide. It's a genocide. That's how they describe it, that it is targeted against the northern leaders, the northern both civilians and military leaders. And that was what actually led to the second coup, or what we can call counter coup, in that same 1966, when General Yakubu Gowon eventually seized power through a very bloody military coup against General Aguiyi-Ironsi. So, due to crises that followed the first military coup, the military government have no other choice than to brought in a particular reasonable number of civilians into their government in order to help them to douse the tensions, particularly at the grassroots. And it was on this agenda that the military president as a then, General Aguiyi-Ironsi, Johnson Aguiyi-Ironsi, was actually moving from one state to another, from north to east, east to west, try to talk to people, to reason along why they have to carry out the coup, what they intend to do. You know, he was trying to pacify people, to appeal to people to reason along, of which, you know, some people of particular ethnic group have already develop impressions toward his government. You know, they've already tagged his government as an attack on a particular ethnic group, a genocide attack on a particular ethnic group, because it was during that coup that a lot of northern military leaders were killed, including some civilian leader from the north, even in the other part of the country as well. But it was so much in the north than every other part of the country as at then. The killing was so much. So it seemed there was no amount of appealing that Aguiyi-Ironsi can make that can appease the aggrieved people as at then. And that was what actually led to the counter coup that eventually saw to the hand of Aguiyi-Ironsi himself. Because in that coup, Aguiyi-Ironsi was killed, and he was killed in Ibadan here when General Adebayo was acting as his host when he visited Ibadan, the headquarters of Western region as at that time, trying to talk to people and all that. And the coup plotter eventually laid siege, demanding his host to release him to be killed, of which the man refused to do that. That if they are going to kill his host, they should allow him to leave his region first before they can do anything. And that singular action also led to the death of General Adebayo himself, because since he was not ready to give his oga away to the coup plotter, so they have to kill both of them. So at this particular period, you know, we are still discussing the extent of civilian involvement in Nigerian forced military government or regime. At this particular period, for instance, in Southwest, General Adebayo, who was the governor of the Western region then, usually consulted with the local party leader before he can appoint a commissioner to his provincial government, because he was able to identify some strong party leader within his region. And don't forget the fact that we said military are not trained to govern. So he relied on the consultation with the party leader, the local party leader within his region, to provide him with competent hand that can serve under his regional government as commissioners. The military government as at then also set up advisory body called leaders of thought. Leaders of thought. And this advisory body include both the military leaders and the civilians counterpart and their civilian counterpart. So in this regard, both military leaders and civilian and their civilian counterpart met regularly on informal basis, because this arrangement was not indoctrinated into their decree. You know, military use decree to rule. So it was on informal basis. They met regularly to discuss crucial issue as it is affecting the region and the nation as at that time. And one thing the military government maintained was they ensure that they have the final authority over any issue being discussed. Even when acting the other way will be at the expense of the region or the country itself, the military ensure that they have the final authority. So the commissioners and the party leader were just merely acting as advisory body. They have no authority During this period as well, the bureaucracy or the bureaucrat, they had a greater leeway. They enjoy a lot of privileges compared to what they used to enjoy during democratic regime. You know, the political leader under democratic rule, some of them are technocrats, some are professional in different aspects of economy, some are accountants, some are lawyers, some are administrators. So they have knowledge not just of governance but also of other aspects of the Nigerian economy. So this made them to assert more authority, more influence over the bureaucrat. That means that give them the ability to put the bureaucrat in check. That is why they will say, as a bureaucrat, you can only be held either through your advice, through policy recommendations, and so on and so forth. You cannot be seen. So, and the fact that the bureaucrat or bureaucracy enjoy a greater, they exercise, they enjoy a lot of privileges. They have higher leeway, greater leeway during military regime, because military have little understanding of many aspects of Nigerian economy, not to talk of governance. When it comes to issue of economics, and if military are to relate on economic aspect or what has to do with accounting and so on and so forth, they have to purely rely on the bureaucrat. If it comes to issue of administration, they also have to rely on the bureaucrat. If it comes to issue of road maintenance, you know, agriculture and so on and so forth, they solely rely not just for advice or policy recommendation, even sometimes for execution. So that gives bureaucrats or bureaucracy a lot of advantage or privilege, which also makes civilians to conclude at that time that the bureaucrats are also part of the problem that is helping to elongate the tenure of military regime, that they don't want the civilian to return back to the government. They don't want the return of democracy because of what they are enjoying. Whether that was the case or not, as the course proceed, we shall see. What are the things, you know, don't forget, we are also talking about the influence of civilian over the military regime. Civilians also have their way. They had their way during military regime based on the weaknesses the military government have. They exploit their weaknesses. For instance, in Western region, there was widespread riots by farmers, particularly between 1968 and 1969. During that period, farmers attacked federal prison in September 1969 and freed all the occupants of that prison. As I was saying earlier, because military have no grand knowledge of governance, that particular action caught them unaware, unprepared. So what they have to do is to call on the civilians to intervene, to intercede in their behalf, to help them to down the tension by appealing to the farmer, talking to the grassroots people, so they can bring the situation under control. And that also gives the civilian the opportunity to have upper hand over the military rulers, because as at that time they were also using that opportunity to negotiate for other things, to shift the table. In fact, it was even believed at that time that some politicians actually sponsor the farmer riots that happened in 1968, between 1968 and 1969 in the Western region, just to create a very unconducive environment for military regime to excel. So I was saying, the civilian cabinet, the politician also became so powerful and influential at that particular period because military government have to rely on them to reach out to the grassroots people and to bring the crisis under control. So this period is also like a boom period for politicians because they exploit the period to their own advantage. I want to talk about how civilian politicians rate the military government. As I said earlier, someone that push you out of your seat and take over from you without your consent, will you rate the person fairly? Definitely not. So the civilian rate military government very poorly. They were rated as uncivil, unfriendly, corrupt, government full of gangsterism, undemocratic. All sorts of acronyms were used to describe the military government in a negative forms. And they also said that the corruption they claim they are coming to reduce or to eradicate at the end of the day fluster. They multiply during military regime because it was believed during democratic regime they have legislature and judiciary apart from the executives. The three arms of government, the organs of government, they act as a checks and balances against one another. But under the military regime, there was nothing like that. There was no check and balances. Whatever the military supreme council or whatever they decided is the final. Nobody can contend, nobody can challenge it. So, and that give them a lot of unchecked authority or power to do and undo. So, similarly, during military regime, we are talking about how the civilian. We are talking about how the civilian rate the military government of the first republic after the first republic. During this period, political participation was also suspended. Electoral body was suspended. Political activity they were also banned. So political participation was very low, if at all, if there was any political activity. It was very low. There was no robust consultation with the people. Military hardly dialogue or consult with the people. The least they were doing as at then was to use the civilian politicians as a bridge breeder to bridge the gap between them and the people. And politicians also exploiting that particular opportunity to their own advantage. So during that period, there was no consultation between the military government and the people. During this period, there were a lot of human rights abuse. The fundamental human rights people can no longer be guaranteed under the military regime because constitution was suspended. People are being jailed without trial. People are being sentenced to death for unflimsy excuses. So In our next class, we look further into some of the things we have discussed here. I will employ you if you have any area that you want me to provide more clarifications or further explanation. Please don't hesitate to send your comments, observations, and if there's any question, please do send them to me. I wish you all the best. Thank you.